Most people who watch this video will do nothing with it. They'll nod, they'll feel something shift inside their chest, and then they'll go back to whatever they were doing before. But a small number of you, maybe 3 or 4 out of every 100, will hear one specific thing in the next 18 minutes and make a decision that changes the entire shape of your life. The question you need to answer right now, before we go any further, is this: are you the kind of person who changes when they find the right information, or the kind who already knows what they need to know and keeps waiting for the right time? Don't answer out loud, just hold that. Here's the thing nobody says clearly. The decision that determines whether you retire at 40 or grind until 65 does not happen at 65. It does not happen at 50. It happens once in a single afternoon, usually between the ages of 26 and 32. You either make it or you don't, and almost nobody makes it. Not because they lack the money, not because they lack the intelligence, but because they never understood what the decision actually was. I made that decision at 28, sitting in my car in a parking garage in downtown Chicago, eating a gas station sandwich at 7:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. And everything I'm about to tell you comes from that moment. What I got right, what I got catastrophically wrong first, and the exact number that made the difference. Stay with me, because the number is not what you expect. Here's what that feels like in the body. It's not panic. Panic would almost be easier, because panic demands action. This is something slower. This is the feeling of standing on train tracks, knowing the train is scheduled, and telling yourself you have plenty of time to move, while also never quite moving. The train is not retirement. The train is the compounding cost of inaction. Every month you don't understand what I'm about to explain. That train gets closer. Not metaphorically, mathematically. In 2007, a behavioral economist at Princeton named Eldar Shafir published research showing that people don't fail to plan for retirement because they're lazy. They fail because they're experiencing what he called tunneling, a cognitive narrowing caused by immediate financial pressure that physically shrinks the mental bandwidth available for long-range thinking. In plain language, when you're worried about this month's bills, your brain cannot effectively model 30 years from now. Not won't, cannot. The architecture of stress itself blocks the planning function, which means if you've ever told yourself you'll figure this out later when things settle down, you weren't procrastinating. You were experiencing a documented cognitive limitation. That's not an excuse to stay there, but it does mean the problem isn't your discipline. The problem is that nobody ever handed you the one framework that breaks the tunnel open. That's what this video is. And the reason most people never get that framework is because the people who have it, the ones who retired at 38, 41, 44, they stopped explaining it in terms the rest of us can hear. They speak in terms of passive income and asset allocation and withdrawal rate optimization, and your eyes glaze over because none of that language tells you what to actually do on a Wednesday morning when you have $14,000 in savings and a job you'd rather not work forever. What I'm about to give you is the version that actually lands. The framework has a name nobody uses because it sounds boring. It's called the savings rate doctrine, and I want to warn you that when I explain it, part of your brain will try to dismiss it as obvious. Resist that impulse, because obvious is not the same as applied. And the gap between knowing this and applying it is exactly the distance between retiring at 40 and retiring never. Here is the core logic, stripped down to its skeleton. The speed at which you reach financial independence depends almost entirely on one variable. Not your income, your savings rate, the percentage of your take-home pay that you invest rather than spend. This is the number that determines everything, and almost nobody tracks it with the precision it deserves. A man named Mr. Money Mustache, real name Peter Adani, retired in 2005 at age 30 with $600,000 in investments and zero debt, on a household income that never exceeded $67,000 a year. His savings rate was 66%. At that rate, the math shows you reach financial independence in approximately 10 years from zero. That is not an opinion. That is a table built on a 4% withdrawal rate, which is itself backed by the Trinity study, a 1998 paper from Trinity University that analyzed every 30-year retirement window since 1926. The study found that a portfolio of 50% stocks and 50% bonds, drawn down at 4% annually, survived 96% of all historical 30-year periods. The math works. The math has always worked, but nobody handed you the table. Here is what the table actually says, translated into years. At a 10% savings rate, which is what most financial advisors recommend, and which is probably close to what you're doing if you're maxing a basic 401k contribution, you need approximately 43 years to reach financial independence. You start at 25, you're done at 68. At a 25% savings rate, that number drops to 32 years. At 50%, it drops to 17 years. At 65%, it drops to 10.5 years. Start at 28 with a 65% savings rate. You're done by 38 and a half. Now here is the part that breaks people when they first encounter it. These numbers assume zero starting wealth, which means if you already have savings, if you have $14,000 or $40,000 or $80,000 sitting in accounts right now, you are already ahead of the starting line. The clock is not starting at zero. It started the day you made your first deposit. Time already worked for you. The question is whether you're going to let it keep working, or whether you're going to keep trading it for things that don't return it. But here is where I have to tell you something that cost me almost 2 years to figure out, 2 years of doing the right math and still not moving forward. Because understanding the savings rate is not enough. You need to understand why increasing it feels psychologically impossible even when it is financially straightforward. And the reason comes down to a mechanism your brain runs that nobody ever names directly. Economists call it lifestyle inflation. But that label makes it sound like a spending problem, which lets you think the solution is willpower and budgeting, which is why every person who has tried to just spend less on pure discipline alone eventually slides back to where they started within 18 months. The real mechanism is identity-based consumption. The things you spend money on are not purchases. They are statements about who you believe you are and who you believe you're becoming. The $68,000 truck is not transportation. It's a declaration. The $2,400 apartment, when $1,600 would functionally serve you, is not comfort. It's a costume. I drove a 2009 Honda Civic with 201,000 miles on it until I was 36 years old. My co-workers thought something was wrong with me. One of them, I'll call him Marcus, bought a new F-150 at 29 for $54,000 financed over 7 years at 6.9% interest. His total cost, fully paid out, was $71,340. The monthly payment was $835. Every single month for 7 years, Marcus sent $835 to a dealership instead of to a brokerage account. If that $835 per month had gone into a low-cost index fund tracking the S&P 500, earning the historical average of 10.7% annually, those 7 years of payments would have grown to $109,847 by the end of the loan term. Marcus did not have $109,847. Marcus had a depreciating truck worth $22,000 and the feeling that he had made a reasonable adult decision. That is not a knock on Marcus. Marcus did exactly what the culture around him trained him to do. The visual language of success in America is expensive. And when you're 29 and making real money for the first time, the gravitational pull toward looking successful is overwhelming. You've earned it, haven't you? The apartment, the car, the dinners. These feel like rewards, and they are rewards. That's the problem. They reward you right now for trading away the future version of yourself who gets to stop working at 40. Every dollar of lifestyle inflation is a vote against that version of you. So the decision I made at 28, sitting in that parking garage, eating that stale turkey sandwich under fluorescent lights, while my phone showed me a spreadsheet I'd built on my lunch break, was not really a financial decision. It was an identity decision. I decided that I was the kind of person who optimizes for freedom rather than the appearance of success. And the moment I made that decision, with real conviction, the savings rate took care of itself. I went from saving 14% of my income to saving 54% inside of 4 months. Not through deprivation, through deliberate redirection. You're about halfway through this video, and I want to be direct with you about what's coming, because the last 30 years of my life, not the hardest part, the most important part, lives in the next 7 minutes. You now understand the savings rate math. You understand the identity trap. But there's one more piece that most people in this conversation never reach. It's the piece that separates people who understand early retirement intellectually from people who actually achieve it. It involves a number most financial content never tells you to calculate, a specific account structure that costs you nothing to set up but adds an average of 6 to 11 years of compound growth to your timeline, and the single psychological move that prevents the collapse that destroys 80% of people who try this and quit inside year 2. If you have watched this far and recognized yourself anywhere in what I've described, in the parking garage, in Marcus's truck, in the refrigerator hum of a Tuesday that never ends, then what's coming is for you specifically. Do not close this. The number I'm about to give you in the next section is the number that, when I finally ran it at 3:22 a.m. on a Thursday in February 2017, made me put my laptop down and sit in the dark for 4 minutes without moving. The number is your FI number, financial independence number. Take your annual living expenses, not your income, your expenses, what you actually spend in a year to live comfortably, and multiply by 25. That is the portfolio size at which you can stop working forever, drawing 4% annually, and, statistically, never running out of money across a 30-year horizon. If you spend $52,000 a year, your FI number is $1,300,000. If you spend $38,000 a year, your FI number is $950,000. If you spend $44,000 a year, your FI number is $1,100,000. That number probably just felt either terrifyingly large or surprisingly achievable. Here is why it gets achievable fast. The S&P 500 has returned an average of 10.7% annually since 1957. A $500 monthly contribution starting at age 28, invested in a low-cost total market index fund. VTSAX carries an expense ratio of 0.04%, meaning on a $100,000 portfolio, you pay $40 a year, grows to $1,131,000 in 25 years. Increase that contribution to $1,500 monthly, which is achievable at a 50% savings rate on a $75,000 income, and you hit $1,100,000 in approximately 15 years. Start at 28, done at 43. That is not a fantasy. That is a compound interest table. Now for the account structure, because this is where most people leave money on the table for years without realizing it. The Roth IRA, you contribute after-tax dollars now. Every dollar of growth, every dollar of withdrawal in retirement, tax-free. The contribution limit in 2024 was $7,000 per year. If you contribute $7,000 per year from age 28 to 60, that account, at a 10% average return, grows to $1,387,000, all of which you withdraw without paying a single dollar in taxes. Now stack that with a taxable brokerage account for the years between 40 and 59.5 before Roth distributions become penalty-free. You build 2 parallel engines. One runs tax-free at 59.5. One funds the gap years between financial independence and traditional retirement age. The psychological move, the one that prevents the 80% collapse rate, is this. Automate everything before you touch your paycheck. A 2010 paper by Shlomo Benartzi and Richard Thaler in the American Economic Review showed that automatic enrollment in savings plans increased participation rates from 37% to 86%, and that those participants maintained or increased contributions over time, while voluntarily enrolled participants reduced contributions under financial stress. Automation removes the decision from the stress environment. You never feel the money leave. You never experience the sacrifice as sacrifice. You simply watch the number grow. And over time, watching the number grow becomes its own reward, a new dopamine loop that replaces the one the truck used to provide. Here is what life looks like on the other side of that decision. At 38, I stopped setting an alarm, not because I was rich by any visible measure. I drove the same Honda Civic 2 more years after that, but because my portfolio was generating $47,000 a year at a 4% withdrawal rate, and my annual expenses were $41,000. The gap was $6,000 of margin between everything I needed and everything my money produced without me. That margin felt like standing on solid ground for the first time after years of treading water. But here is what they don't show you in the financial independence content. The hardest moment is not the sacrifice. The hardest moment is the year before you cross the line, when your FI number is close enough to see but far enough that the doubt becomes loud. At 36, with roughly $900,000 in combined accounts, I almost accepted a promotion that would have added $28,000 to my annual salary. More money sounds like more freedom. It is not. It is more lifestyle inflation pressure, more identity investment in a career you're trying to leave, and 2 to 3 additional years of obligation to a structure you've been working to exit for a decade. I turned it down. My manager looked at me like I had declined a gift from God. He is 54 now. He works 60 hours a week. He has a beautiful house and a truck newer than Marcus's, and a retirement account that he's been told will be ready when he turns 67. He is a good man. He made the culturally approved decisions at every fork. And when I see him at an industry conference once a year, there is a specific look that passes across his face when I tell him what I did that morning, which was, on that particular morning, gone on a 3-hour hike with my daughter at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday. The number that built that life was $1,047,000, the portfolio value on the morning I ran my final FI calculation, and confirmed that it exceeded 25 times my annual expenses, $1,047,000. Built in 11 years, on an income that peaked at $94,000 before I left, savings rate that averaged 58%, invested entirely in VTSAX, a Roth IRA, and a taxable brokerage account. No real estate, no side businesses, no inheritance. Just the decision, made at 28, in a parking garage, under fluorescent lights, that freedom was more valuable than the appearance of having arrived. So here is the decision in front of you right now. Not the financial decision, you have the math. Not the account decision, you have the structure. The identity decision. Who are you, at this specific moment in your life, choosing to become? Because the version of you that retires at 40 and spends Tuesday mornings on a hiking trail with someone you love, that version exists. The math confirms it. Start by calculating your FI number tonight. Annual expenses multiplied by 25. Open a Vanguard account and set up an automatic monthly transfer before Friday. Calculate your current savings rate and identify the single largest category of spending that funds the appearance of success rather than the experience of freedom. Redirect it. Not all of it. Enough to feel the shift. If this video gave you the thing you came for, share it with one person who's eating a gas station sandwich in a parking garage somewhere and quietly running numbers they haven't shown anyone yet. And if you want the spreadsheet I built that Tuesday night in Chicago, the exact model I used to track my savings rate, project my FI date, and optimize account allocation year by year, it's linked below, free. No email required, because the only thing that matters now is that you use it.